My guest here today is Mr. Vic Neufeld from Aphria. He needs no introduction, of course. Welcome, Vic.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ben, and better you than James, actually, so this is good.
It's good to hear. Now, investors, I'm sure, are aware of the huge press release that came out this morning. Yeah. Aphria, of course, was involved with Scythian Biosciences, a subsidiary, where they purchased a holding in Latinum Holdings from Scythian. Now, how does that acquisition play out in the company's grand scheme plans?
Yeah, great question. So I think to begin with, it further solidifies our global leadership. We have been very, very focused for a year and a half in certain European areas, and we remain very focused and energized in other countries that we are trying to penetrate. But in terms of Latin America and why Scythian, it is an area where we didn't really pay a lot of attention to. We were very focused on more mature markets, that presented themselves at the time. Scythian, on the other hand, was like a mining company looking for an exploration company. Goldcorp, Barrick, they reach out to exploration companies that have already found certain nuggets around the world. And for us, it was a huge de-risking of deployment of resources and capital. We were brought into the Argentinian opportunity about a year ago, and I spent two different in-market trips nurturing relationships with departments of health and, in this case, Department of Agriculture. In terms of Colombia, 5-day in-market with understanding the environmental, political, safety, the whole concept of why Colombia. And then I met the in-market teams. And I tell you, Ben, you can have the best strategies, but if you don't execute, you're not destined for success. So one of the other objects of why we spent a lot of time in Argentina, but also Colombia recently, is to understand the bench strength of leaders. Colombia, for example, Colcana, and the tremendous passion of the individuals there. And that kind of solidified the deal. So Scythian to us was really searching marketplaces where we did not have our own footprints. And the transaction was first with a supply agreement, and then I decided, no, I want this to be fully controlled under the Aphria banner, Aphria International, which is a division of Aphria.
Okay, great. Now, speaking of the Argentinian and Colombian opportunities, with Colombia specifically, with ideal growing conditions and low labor and input costs, where you might get cannabis yields down to 5 or 10 cents a gram, does Aphria view this as a potential global manufacturer and distribution hub for CBD oil worldwide? It's hard to imagine any other nation competing on that sort of cost scale.
Yeah, so Colombia actually has 3 fingers of its strategic plan. One is to grow for in-country requirements. 2, exporting to those Latin America countries that they have economic zone treaties with, including, say, Mexico, Chile, Peru, Brazil. And then ultimately, although not factored into our pro formas, an export outside of South America. Whether Canada, Europe, let's not even go there because it's too far a journey down the road. But back to the Colombian opportunity, what really excited us, other than the tremendous leadership team that have been at this for over 2 years, I might add, in the beautiful coffee fields on the west side of the Andes. I say coffee fields because the climate control, the soils, the water management, electricity, safety, all of those are big check marks. So we have pursued this opportunity, now culminated with today's announcement, basically really wanting to move their business plan forward, but in a bigger, more meaningful way. So we have 35 acres. Our designs over 3 phases of the project are to build three different phases on 20.5 acres of land. That's capable of over 50,000 kilos a year. probably more than is required for in-market. So yes, now export, as I've already shared, are those opportunities. And oil extraction is absolutely part of it. So the low cost, 5-10 cents a gram, I think you're pretty close to the ballpark there. Very cheap labor. The land was almost pocket change in terms of an acquisition. The most level land that we've seen in all of the Colombian land scopes that we reviewed. Is absolutely ideal. To Argentina, though, something that began over a year ago in the Department of Health and getting the only license issued by the Department of Health for importation of our high CBD oil, Redu, orders coming from the Ministry of Health, but at the outset are going to a certain university and a hospital for research purposes. Very timely interview because just last week we received notification from the Argentinian regulators that they, over the next 90 days, they want to explore and really come to a conclusion on a joint venture where we actually build our Aphria greenhouse technology and grow in country. So Colombia will be an interim step on exporting to certain countries, but like many countries in Europe, they all want eventually in-country cultivation so that they can control, regulate the safety, the efficacy, et cetera.
Of course. Now, moving on to the Jamaican assets of the deal. Now, is the attraction of that jurisdiction the same as in South America, where it could eventually become a manufacturing and distribution hub within the archipelago of the Caribbean? Or how do you view that? Is it more of a local market thing, or distribution within the Caribbean itself?
So Jamaica provides actually 4 different strategic options for us. One, grow domestic, sell domestic for the recreational market, the Joe tourist. We know we're not going to sell to residents of the country. They all grow it in their backyard. Secondly, it's the Jamaican medical and where that's moving toward in terms of dispensaries. Thirdly, reaching out to certain other Caribbean countries and their treaties where their various ministries of health are now talking about using Jamaica as the cultivation hub to service their medical needs. And fourth and finally, and again, not calibrated into our pro formas, but looking at export. I mean, October 17th, here in Canada, we know it's happening. Can you imagine if Aphria brought one of its brands forward with the Colombian gold, as an example? Very excited about that opportunity, but it's just one of 4 different strategic paths, all 4 of which we will be pursuing.
Of course, and some of that, whether that opportunity materializes, will depend on some of the advertising regulations by Health Canada. And there's some chicanery going on there, as we've seen in the press in recent times. Now, would you like to perhaps comment on what's going on and how you see that playing out, whether you see the restrictions being lifted or eased, or perhaps, perhaps they won't be eased at all? What are your thoughts on that?
So, if you were James West, I'd correct you on your vocabulary. Chicanery is not a word I would have used for certain activities of specifically to other licensed producers. I would call it slipperiness and flying in the face of ethical behavior, because everyone knows what Health Canada rules are. Billboards, concert endorsements, sponsorships, etc. They have taken this liberalized interpretation to their advantage. We've understood that warning letters have gone out, but again, this is really not in concert with the underlying theme, the understanding, the integrity of what Health Canada was trying to bring to the table. The ACMPR, which governs this today, and the advertising rules as presented, and more clarity going forward, but these sort of activities, some marketers would say very far-reaching and edgy, but those that really understand long-term business and brand awareness would call it trickery and slipperiness, because this is total violation of, and quite frankly, in my opinion, it's giving the middle finger to Health Canada.
So I take this to mean that Aphria will abide by the rule of the law and not engage in what some other companies out there are doing in terms of putting their branding out there contrary to the rules?
So we have a series of brand activation tactics and activities all lined up. I refer to it as the dominoes are ready to fall. It's a matter of when different organizations view the timeliness of this activation, so we're still waiting. It's premature in our perspective. But when we do, we will make sure that it is not in violation of the interpretations as an average individual would interpret the ACMPR rules. So we are out there and we will be activating for brand awareness. We have many brands that we're bringing to the Canadian consumer. We've got every province now registering our products. We're doing like more than our fair share. I'm very, very proud of my sales marketing teams on bringing these brands to the table. Our price points, our product variety, our promise of availability, but we will not flaunt in the face of Health Canada.
Fair enough. Now, just refocusing back on the Scythian deal for a second. Now, this deal puts Aphria, it vaults you in clear position in the Latin American, Caribbean markets. Now, other LPs out there, some of the larger ones, are kicking the tires and have participated in limited scope, but this is sort of blows all that away in terms of leadership and scale and assets in your possession. Now, how do you plan on exploiting that position and maintaining that position when the flood of new entrants is only going to grow?
So let me knock off these countries one by one. Jamaica, we are only one of two level 3 licenses awarded by the government. We've already had one full harvest sitting in the vault. Our second major harvest is in process as we speak. So product availability and product quality is already on our balance sheet. We're moving forward on the proper licensing and site leaseholds on I guess they call them ganja houses, but basically retail outlets. And we're very, very excited about what the price points these things can bring forward. Argentina, as I said, we are absolutely committed to being part of the government program there. The relationships we've established, the Aphria story, that has really taken us to the level we're at there. I feel very, very confident on some huge successes in Argentina. And Colombia, I've already shared enough, but again, I just want to reiterate that the whole business model in Colombia, low cost, climate, land, et cetera, is really part of where and how we're going to move Latin America. So I could tell you between LATAM, this acquisition, by the end of 2019, on a conservative basis, we're probably going to generate 50 million revenue minimum, and I'm going to say 60% EBITDA, not margin, EBITDA, unheard of in this industry.
Wow, it's pretty impressive. And that will be accretive?
Very accretive. That's why certain investors who are looking at today's transaction may not quite understand, but you need to embed yourself today at lower costs, lower entry costs, and bring on board the right talent. You know, certain organizations talk about strategy, we execute strategy. And the Aphria execution it's really a culmination of many strengths, but one for sure is making sure the leadership in country is beyond reproach, has integrity, are really solid, understanding the political framework, the regulatory framework, and know how to grow. And that's what Colombia brings, Jamaica brings. I mean, Jamaica, we have a 19 Cannabis Cup winner as our master grower. Again, I speak to the Jamaica Gold one day being on the shelves of retailers. Not sure where in Ontario, but I can tell you other provinces will have the retail. So it's tremendous opportunity. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say Brazil. So Scythian again has the Rolodex, had the relationships, and has the people that have moved the needle with certain Brazilian regulatory bodies and a major pharmaceutical player. I'm going to call them the Apotex of Canada. all part of their team. And part of this whole agreement is that we have our first right of refusal for a very cheap entry price of $24 million for 50.1% should they be successful in their license. Now, we were hoping before today's announcement they would have crossed the finish line, but when lawyers get involved, there's all sorts of complexities and delays and push-outs, and that's what's happened here. But I feel very confident that once Brazil moves, again, Aphria at a very, very, I'm going to call it cheap entry price to an explosive market called Brazil. That's the golden nugget. Like Germany is to Europe, Brazil is to South America.
Yeah, absolutely. They have about, what, half of South Americans' total population, something like that. So would you foresee that optionality kicking in perhaps some point in the near future, or it's sort of hard to see how that's going to play out as of yet? It depends on the license, correct?
So this is a James West question, you know that, eh? I would suggest to you that before the end of this year, we will know with certainty whether or not the licensing process with the ministers of health, justice in Brazil, our relationship partners that will remain non-descriptive at this time, will have moved the needle forward enough that, and I'm fully hoping and expecting, wanting to transact this and send 24 million shares of dollars worth of Aphria shares that way. Colombia is really exciting. If Colombia is a home run, Brazil is a grand slam.
Great. Well, my newsletter will be following the story, and I'm sure I'll be writing a whole lot more about it. Thank you, Mr. Vic Neufeld, for joining us in studio today.